He refused every woman until an Apache widow asked, "Do you want a wife or just a place to stay?" The twin suns of the planet Arisia shone harshly in the sky, casting long, jagged shadows over the barren landscape. The heat was sharp, but Elias did not flinch. Years on the frontier had taught him that discomfort was a small price to pay for discovery. Elias was not like other men in the colony. The settlers often teased him, calling him the lone wolf of Arisia, though Elias hardly noticed. He had refused every attempt to pair him with a companion, every match suggested by the colony council, every shy approach by women seeking friendship or something more. He preferred silence, calculation, and the rhythm of machinery over chatter and companionship. His heart had its reasons, and he did not wish to explain them. His ship, the Pathfinder, was parked several hundred meters below on a plateau landing area, its sleek metal glinting in the sunlight. Elias had been surveying a deep canyon system that jutted into the planet's red plains, mapping new water channels and assessing the potential for energy extraction. The canyon walls rose like jagged teeth, and small streams of mist flowed from cracks in the rock. It was a dangerous but fascinating place, a place where only the brave or the reckless would wander. Elias was both. As he adjusted the scanner strapped to his wrist, a sudden flicker of movement caught his eye. A shadow passed over a ridge, quick and purposeful. He squinted, but the sun glinted off the scanner's screen, making it hard to see. He frowned. The area was supposed to be empty. Only rocks, dust, and the occasional desert creature called this canyon home. Yet he could have sworn he had seen a figure, human maybe. Curious, Elias muttered to himself, brushing a hand over his sandy brown hair. His boots crunched on the coarse gravel as he descended carefully toward the ridge. Every movement was deliberate. One misstep, and he could tumble into the canyon below. But his curiosity outweighed his caution. The shadow had been too precise, too deliberate to be a wild animal. As he approached, he noticed signs of habitation. A small footprint pressed into soft red soil, the remnants of a makeshift shelter partially covered by sand, and the faint smell of smoke from some recently extinguished fire. Elias paused, kneeling to inspect the ground. The footprint was adult-sized human, and judging by its depth, left by someone who carried weight carefully, someone accustomed to survival. Elias straightened and surveyed the surrounding area. The canyon was a maze of cliffs, hidden caves, and narrow passages. Whoever lived here had adapted to the harsh environment. This was not a casual traveler's path. He felt a spark of excitement. Humans, or human descendants, living in isolation were rare on Arisia. Most settlers clustered near the colony hub, relying on technology and supplies shipped from orbiting stations. Survival here required ingenuity, intelligence, and courage. A soft sound, a scrape of rock against rock, made Elias freeze. He turned, scanning the shadows. Slowly, a figure emerged from behind a jagged rock face. She was tall, with long black hair tied back in a braid. Her clothing was simple but functional. A tunic and pants made from the durable fibers of the local flora, stitched together by hand. Straps held small pouches and tools close to her body. She moved gracefully, every step deliberate, and her dark eyes assessed him calmly. "Who are you?" Elias called, keeping his voice steady. The woman's eyes narrowed, but she did not step back. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing at her lips. "You're far from the colony, Captain," she said. Her voice was soft, clear, yet confident, carrying a tone of curiosity rather than fear. "Not many wander these canyons." Elias studied her carefully. He had expected suspicion, maybe even hostility, but not this. She seemed self-assured, grounded in a way he found unusual. "And you are?" he asked cautiously. "This area isn't marked for settlement." "I make it my home," she replied simply. "The canyon provides what I need. Water, shelter, food, it is enough." Elias blinked. The bluntness of her statement was almost refreshing, Most people in the colony would have asked for help or expressed fear at being alone in such a place. This woman had adapted. She was competent. She had survived. He felt a grudging respect stirring in his chest. "I'm Elias Thorne," he said finally. "Engineer and explorer, captain of the Pathfinder." She nodded, as though he had simply confirmed what she already suspected. "I know who you are." "Everyone in the colony knows." Her gaze held his for a moment, sharp and discerning. "They say you refuse every woman who asks you to join them." Elias felt his cheeks warm slightly, though he kept his expression neutral. "Rumors travel fast," he said. "I focus on work, not relationships." She tilted her head again, almost teasingly. "Then tell me, Captain Thorne, do you want a wife or just a place to stay?" The question struck him unexpectedly. He had encountered clever, witty women before, but none had phrased their challenge so directly, so audaciously. Most would have skirted the subject, offered a polite smile, or avoided the topic entirely. But here she was, standing alone in a desert canyon, daring him to answer honestly. Elias shook his head slowly, a small, reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "I don't usually answer questions like that," he admitted. She laughed softly, the sound like water trickling over stones. "Good. Then you're human after all," she said. "I need help. There are structures I'm trying to repair, systems I'm trying to build. Someone like you, someone who understands machines, could make a difference." Elias studied her, noting the small details. The worn edges of her tools, the careful arrangement of her makeshift home, the meticulous way she had cleared the dust from the shelter's entrance. She had survived, yes, but not by luck, by intelligence, by planning, and by effort. This intrigued him far more than any romantic notion ever could. "I see," he said slowly. "You need assistance, and in exchange, what?" "Knowledge," she replied without hesitation. "And company if you are willing. I do not ask for more than what is offered freely." Elias considered this. He had never shared his expertise so openly with strangers. He had built machines, repaired systems, and designed energy networks for the colony, but always alone, always on his own terms. The idea of helping someone who truly needed him and could match his skill was appealing. "Very well," he said finally after a long pause. "I will help, but make no mistake, I am here to work, not otherwise." She nodded, her dark eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "Fair enough, Captain, but remember my words. There is a difference between needing a place to stay and finding someone worth staying with." Elias felt an unusual sense of anticipation. The canyon around them, once simply a map to explore and conquer, now seemed alive with possibility. For the first time in years, he wondered what it would mean to connect with someone outside the cold walls of logic and duty. Not for companionship, not yet, but perhaps for something more. They began walking together toward her settlement, a small cluster of shelters nestled in a protective alcove of rock. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the canyon, painting it in oranges and purples. Elias observed the clever ways she had diverted water to small troughs, the careful placement of wind collectors to generate power, and the ingenious storage of food and resources. Every detail spoke of patience, intelligence, and resilience. "Impressive," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. She glanced at him with a small, knowing smile. "I have to be. This canyon does not forgive mistakes." For hours, Elias studied the system she had created, offering suggestions here and there, adjusting machinery, and helping her optimize energy flow. It was work he had done countless times before, but never with someone as capable as her beside him. By the time the twin suns sank below the horizon, painting the desert in deep red and violet hues, Elias felt something unfamiliar. Satisfaction not just in accomplishment, but in shared effort. He had refused every woman for years, believing solitude was his strength. But now, standing beside her in the fading light, he began to wonder if there might be something else worth exploring. As the first stars of Arisia appeared overhead, Elias looked at her and realized that he had, perhaps, finally met someone who could challenge him, not just as a colleague, but as a human being. And for the first time in a long while, he did not turn away from the thought. The next morning, the desert sun rose slowly over the canyon, painting the rocky walls in gold and amber. Captain Elias Thorne awoke in the small shelter Aeon had prepared for him, a place neat, organized, and simple, yet surprisingly comfortable. The faint scent of dried herbs filled the air, and the soft rustle of wind through the canyon made the space feel alive. Elias stretched, noticing the quiet hum of machinery running nearby. His eyes followed the lines of copper pipes and small turbines that Aeon had constructed to capture water and convert energy from the desert wind. She had built all this herself. His admiration grew silently. It was rare to meet someone with such skill, especially someone working entirely alone. Aeon appeared at the entrance, carrying a small container of warm water and a simple breakfast of dried fruit and nuts. Her dark hair was braided neatly, and her eyes, sharp yet warm, held a flicker of amusement as she saw him inspecting her machines. "Good morning, Captain," she said. "I trust the night was comfortable." Elias nodded, accepting the food. "It was. You have a remarkable setup here." "You live well considering the isolation," she smiled faintly. "I make do. This canyon gives me everything I need. Food, water, shelter, the rest is effort." Elias took a bite of the fruit, thinking, "You survived here alone, no help from the colony." Aeon shook her head. "No one comes this far. Those who try do not stay long, and I prefer it this way. I know the land, the wind, the water. I trust my skills." He studied her carefully. There was strength in her independence, but he sensed loneliness as well. Humans were not made to live entirely alone, no matter how capable they were. He felt a subtle urge to understand her, to bridge that space she had carefully protected. He began, then paused. "I am here to assist you with your systems, your machines, your energy collection. That is my purpose. Anything else is not my concern." Aeon's eyes sparkled. "Of course, but—" She leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice. "You will see that purpose can sometimes grow into something more meaningful if you let it." Elias blinked, unsure how to respond. She had a way of speaking that was simple yet profound, as if she could see into his thoughts. He decided it was best to focus on work. Words could wait. The day passed quickly as Elias examined every system in her settlement. He crawled under pipes, tightened loose connections, and adjusted small turbines to maximize energy output. Aeon followed his movements closely, offering suggestions and explanations. "You should angle this collector slightly," she said, pointing to a small wind vane. "The wind comes from the east in the mornings. It will spin faster this way." Elias nodded, impressed. "Efficient. You understand the desert better than most settlers understand their homes in the colony." She shrugged modestly. "I have to. It is life or failure. I prefer life." They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the hum of machinery and the occasional gust of wind through the canyon. Elias noticed the careful way Aeon moved, every step precise, every action intentional. She had not just survived, she had mastered her environment. By afternoon, Elias had repaired a small water pump, optimized the solar collectors, and reinforced a few weak structural supports in the shelter. The improvements were subtle but significant. Aeon's settlement was already remarkable, but now it was more efficient, more resilient. "You've done well," Aeon said, her voice tinged with respect. "I could have done this alone eventually, but you sped the process by weeks." Elias allowed himself a small smile. "Efficiency is my nature, I cannot help it," she laughed, a sound that echoed softly against the canyon walls. "It suits you. But remember, not all challenges are mechanical." He raised an eyebrow. "Challenges that are not mechanical," she nodded. "Connections, people. Companionship, trust. You are used to solitude, Captain, but even the strongest human benefits from another's perspective." Elias felt a familiar tightening in his chest. She was right, of course. He had chosen solitude for years, convincing himself it was easier, safer, cleaner. But he knew the truth. He had avoided connection not out of choice but fear. Fear of being misunderstood, of losing control, of failing in a world that demanded resilience. He began, then stopped. He had no words that could explain the walls he had built around himself. So he returned to work, tightening a bolt and adjusting a power conduit. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting shadows that stretched long and narrow, Aeon led him to a small observation point at the edge of the canyon. From there, the desert stretched endlessly, red and gold, with jagged cliffs and hidden valleys. "This canyon has secrets," she said softly. "Rivers hidden under sand, caves that store water, places where life thrives quietly. You must learn to look for what is not immediately visible." Elias nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. The canyon was not just a place of survival, it was a test of perception, patience, and intelligence. The human mind, like the canyon, could hold hidden strengths waiting to be discovered. "You have found someone who can teach you this," Aeon continued, turning her gaze to him. "If you are willing to learn." Elias met her eyes. "I am willing to help. I am willing to observe. But I cannot promise more." She smiled faintly, a mix of amusement and challenge. "I did not ask for promises, only your presence, your effort, and your honesty." There was a quiet understanding between them, a bond forming not out of romance but respect. Elias realized that this woman, this widow of the canyon, was remarkable not only for her skill but for her courage and clarity. She had chosen life in the harshest conditions, had thrived where others would have perished, and had met him without pretense. "Show me the water source," Elias said finally, breaking the silence. Aeon nodded and led him down a narrow path carved into the canyon wall. The air grew cooler as they descended, and soon they arrived at a hidden spring, the water clear and sparkling. A small series of channels had been dug to guide the flow to her settlement. "This is the heart of the canyon," she explained. "Without it, nothing survives here. I have protected it carefully." Elias knelt by the water, testing its flow and measuring its potential for expansion. "Ingenious," he murmured. "I could improve the channel system, reduce evaporation, increase storage." She smiled, a quiet expression of pride and challenge. "Then do, but remember, the canyon does not forgive arrogance. Listen to it and it will reward you." The two worked together as the light faded, adjusting channels, reinforcing banks, and constructing small reservoirs to capture rainwater. By the time the stars appeared overhead, the spring and its surrounding systems were more efficient than ever. Elias felt a deep satisfaction, not just in accomplishment but in partnership. He was used to working alone, yet now the collaboration felt natural, almost inevitable. As they returned to the settlement, Aeon stopped and looked at him. "You are different from the others," she said softly. "Most men refuse connection out of pride or fear. You refuse because you have not yet met someone who matches you in skill, in thought, in understanding." Elias was silent. He did not know how to respond. He had spent years avoiding attachment, convincing himself that solitude was strength. But here, in the quiet desert under alien stars, he understood something he had not admitted to himself. Strength was not only in independence, it was in knowing when to trust another. "You may yet change your mind," Aeon added, her eyes glinting in the starlight. "Or perhaps not. That is your choice." Elias nodded, feeling an unfamiliar warmth of anticipation. He did not yet know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing. For the first time in many years, he was curious. Not about maps, machines, or survival, but about a human being who had challenged his solitude and earned his respect. And in the quiet of the canyon, surrounded by the hum of machines and the gentle whisper of wind, Elias allowed himself to consider the possibility that some walls, no matter how carefully built, were meant to be opened. The morning sun rose slowly over the canyon, spilling golden light across the desert floor. Captain Elias Thorne awoke to the soft hum of machinery and the gentle rustle of wind through Aeon's carefully constructed shelters. The desert was quiet, except for the occasional bird-like creature skimming across the cliffs and the faint sound of water flowing through the channels she had dug. Elias stretched, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Today, he would work alongside Aeon more closely than before. Yesterday had been about observation and understanding. Today would be about collaboration. They would improve the water system, optimize energy collection, and explore new ways to sustain life in the harsh canyon environment. Aeon was already awake when he stepped out. She carried a small toolkit and a map she had sketched of the canyon, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon as if predicting the day's challenges. "Good morning, Captain," she said. "Ready to see if you can keep up today?" Elias smiled faintly. "I am always ready. Though I suspect you will be the one teaching me more than I teach you." She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to blend naturally with the wind and the canyon. "Perhaps, but learning is not a weakness. Even the cleverest mind can benefit from another's perspective." They began their work near the spring, the source of the canyon's hidden life. Elias examined the channels they had built yesterday, noting small inefficiencies in the water flow. "If we adjust the angle here," he said, pointing to a small diversion, "we can increase flow by 10% without losing any water to evaporation." Aeon nodded, following his instructions carefully. "I would not have thought of that. The canyon teaches me many things, but sometimes perspective from another mind helps." As they worked together, a rhythm developed. Elias suggested technical improvements, and Aeon responded with practical adjustments based on her knowledge of the terrain and natural forces. Water flowed more efficiently, turbines spun more freely, and small reservoirs captured rainwater before it could seep away. Their collaboration was seamless, a combination of skill and intuition, theory and experience. During a short break, Elias sat beside Aeon on a flat rock overlooking the canyon floor. "You have built this entire settlement alone?" he asked, quietly admiring her handiwork. Aeon nodded. "Yes. After my husband passed, I chose to remain here. I could have returned to the colony, but I felt connected to this place. It challenges me, it teaches me, and it allows me freedom." Elias considered this, freedom. He had always believed he had it himself, wandering from project to project, refusing connection to avoid disappointment. But he realized her freedom was not the same as his. Hers was earned through effort and resilience. His had been self-imposed, a wall built to protect himself from others. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "I have seen settlers who try to survive here. Most fail. You have thrived." She glanced at him, her eyes calm yet probing. "Thank you. But you, Captain Thorne, you thrive in your own way, I can see it. You are precise, clever, and determined. I respect that." Elias felt an unusual warmth. Respect was one thing, admiration another, but hearing it from someone like Aeon carried weight. It was different from the polite compliments he received in the colony, different from idle chatter. This was acknowledgement of his abilities, his mind, his effort. Their work continued through the morning, each challenge bringing them closer as a team. A small wind collector had stopped functioning, its blades jammed with sand and grit. Elias climbed carefully to remove the blockage, while Aeon held tools and guided him on the best angles for alignment. Within an hour, the collector spun smoothly, generating enough energy to power the settlement for an entire day. "You are better than I expected," Aeon said, smiling as the blades turned in the wind. "But I am learning from you as well." Elias shrugged modestly. "We learn from every challenge. I am glad to see the results." By midday, the sun blazed directly overhead. The desert heat was sharp, but the two of them moved efficiently, taking turns adjusting machinery, checking water flow, and reinforcing shelters against potential windstorms. They shared small stories of the colony, of technology and invention, yet neither forced conversation. Words came naturally like the flow of the water they were channeling. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Elias noticed a faint tremor in the canyon floor. Small stones rattled and dust rose from a distant crevice. He frowned. "That's unusual," he said. "The ground is stable here. Let's investigate." Aeon followed him to a narrow canyon path where the tremor seemed strongest. There, they found a small, hidden cave, partially collapsed but still passable. Inside, faint streaks of moisture marked the walls, evidence of underground water channels. "This could be significant," Elias murmured. "If we can map these channels, we can expand your water collection system substantially." Aeon's eyes brightened. "You mean we could make the canyon even more sustainable?" "Yes," Elias said. "More water storage, better energy flow. You could support more people, or even new settlers, without relying on the colony's supply lines." They spent hours in the cave, crawling carefully, measuring, marking walls with chalk, and mapping potential reservoirs. The work was challenging but rewarding. The canyon, once a barrier, now seemed to open its secrets to them. When they emerged, the sun had nearly set, painting the sky in shades of red, purple, and gold. They sat on a rock together, overlooking the settlement below. Elias handed Aeon a small container of water, and she drank gratefully. "You have changed this place in a single day," she said softly. "I cannot believe how much you have contributed." Elias shook his head. "I did not change it alone. You built this. I only helped refine what already exists." Aeon's gaze met his, steady and thoughtful. "You have more than refined, you have improved, and perhaps you have brought a sense of hope." Elias felt a rare smile tug at his lips. Hope, it was not something he associated with himself. He had spent years solving problems, repairing machines, surviving harsh conditions, but he rarely thought about the future in terms of possibility beyond duty. Yet here, with Aeon, he glimpsed the idea that human ingenuity and cooperation could shape life for the better. As darkness fell, they returned to the settlement. Elias worked alongside Aeon one last time, adjusting small pipes and checking energy readings. When the machines were balanced and the water flowing smoothly, he allowed himself a moment to observe her quietly. Aeon noticed his gaze. "You are studying me again," she said with a hint of amusement. "Not studying," Elias replied carefully. "Observing. You are efficient, intelligent, and resilient. I am learning from your choices." She smiled softly. "Then perhaps we are learning from each other." Elias nodded. There was truth in her words, though he would not admit how much they resonated. They had worked together to overcome challenges, to discover hidden resources, and to improve the settlement. Through collaboration, they had built something stronger than either could have done alone. As the stars emerged in the clear desert sky, the canyon quiet and calm around them, Elias realized that this partnership, practical, respectful, and grounded in skill, was unlike anything he had known. For the first time, he felt the subtle thrill of connection without the complications he had feared. Aeon glanced at him, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we will map the outer cliffs and explore the northern ravine. I believe it holds more water channels and perhaps shelter for new settlers." Elias nodded. "I look forward to it. This canyon is teaching me much more than I anticipated." She laughed quietly. "Good. Let it teach you, Captain, and perhaps let it teach you about people as well." Elias turned his gaze to the canyon floor, observing the settlement he had helped improve. The shelters, the flowing water, the spinning turbines, they were small achievements, yet they represented something larger: human ingenuity, cooperation, and the ability to thrive against challenges. And for the first time in many years, Elias felt a sense of anticipation not for exploration or technology, but for partnership, trust, and the quiet, growing bond between himself and a remarkable woman who had dared to ask the question he had long avoided. "Do you want a wife, or just a place to stay?" He did not have an answer yet, but for the first time he wondered if one might be possible. The dawn light seeped gently through the canyon walls, painting the rocky cliffs in soft shades of orange and pink. Captain Elias Thorne stood at the edge of the settlement, observing the turbines turning steadily in the morning wind. Aeon was already moving among the shelters, checking the water channels and inspecting the newly reinforced structures. The canyon had never seemed more alive, and Elias felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing he had helped shape it. Yet, a shadow lingered in his mind. A message had arrived from the colony council earlier that morning, carried by a drone. They wanted him to return immediately. His work here in the canyon was remarkable, they said, but they had a new project, one that could shape the future of the entire planet. Leadership, recognition, and resources awaited him in the main colony. Elias folded the message and slipped it into his coat pocket. He knew the decision he faced would not be easy. Returning to the colony meant leaving the canyon, leaving Aeon, leaving a place that had become more than a settlement. It had become a symbol of collaboration, discovery, and quiet companionship. He walked silently toward Aeon, who was adjusting a small water collector near the edge of the canyon. She noticed his thoughtful expression. "You are distracted," she said softly, setting down her tools. "The canyon senses it." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "The colony wants me to return. There is a new project, a leadership role. It is an opportunity I cannot ignore lightly." Aeon's dark eyes searched his face. She did not speak immediately. Finally, she asked, "And what do you want, Elias, truly?" He looked away, staring at the canyon floor, at the flowing water, the shelters, and the spinning turbines. His mind had been trained to prioritize duty, mission, and logic. Yet now he felt the pull of something else, something deeper. He began, struggling with words he rarely allowed himself to speak. "I have always chosen solitude. I believed it was safer, easier, controlled." But he trailed off, unsure how to explain the warmth he felt in her presence, the admiration he had grown to respect, the subtle thrill of partnership that had developed in just a few days. Aeon stepped closer, gently placing a hand on his arm. "But what?" she asked. "But I am realizing," he said quietly, "that some challenges cannot be faced alone, and perhaps some rewards cannot be appreciated without someone to share them." She nodded slowly, her expression calm but piercing. "You have built walls around yourself, Elias. I see them. But walls can also protect us from what we need most." The morning air was still, filled only with the soft hum of machinery and the distant calls of canyon birds. Elias took a deep breath, weighing the choice before him. The colony offered recognition, resources, and the comfort of structure. The canyon offered freedom, collaboration, and connection with someone who matched him in skill, intelligence, and understanding. "I do not know if I can leave this place," he admitted finally. "And I do not know if I can take the colony's offer and walk away from what we have built here." Aeon smiled faintly. "Then perhaps the answer is not in choosing one or the other. Perhaps it is in deciding what you truly value." He nodded, understanding the subtle truth in her words. He valued more than duty. He valued ingenuity, collaboration, and the human spirit. And for the first time, he realized he valued her. Not for companionship alone, not for convenience, but for the rare combination of strength, intelligence, and courage she represented. They spent the rest of the day preparing for a small test of their systems. Elias wanted to see how well the water channels could handle increased flow, and Aeon suggested testing the turbines under heavier wind conditions. Together, they adjusted the mechanisms, carefully balancing efficiency and durability. As they worked, Elias noticed small moments that he had never allowed himself to notice before. The way Aeon's hands moved with precision and care, the thoughtful expression she wore when solving a problem, the quiet patience she showed when waiting for him to adjust machinery. Each small detail deepened his admiration and respect. By late afternoon, their systems were ready for testing. Elias and Aeon stood side by side at the edge of the canyon, observing the flow of water and the spinning turbines. The system functioned perfectly, and for a brief moment the canyon seemed to hum with life, a living testament to human ingenuity and cooperation. "You have done well," Aeon said softly, her eyes meeting his. "Not just with the machines, but with the settlement. You have helped it thrive." Elias felt a rare warmth in his chest. "We have done well," he corrected gently. "It is not only my work, it is yours as much as mine." She smiled, a small, quiet smile that seemed to light the space between them. "Perhaps we are learning to trust each other," she said. "Not just in machines, but in judgment, in understanding, in partnership." Elias nodded. He had long believed that trust was something fragile, easily broken, and best avoided. Yet now he felt it growing naturally, steadily between them. It was a new and unfamiliar sensation, but one he found compelling. As the sun dipped below the canyon walls, Elias finally spoke of the choice he faced. "The colony's project is important," he said. "It is a chance to influence more than just this canyon, to help the entire settlement network thrive. But I cannot help but think, would I be abandoning something equally important if I leave here?" Aeon remained silent for a moment, then spoke with quiet clarity. "You must decide what matters more to you, not what others expect, but what you truly value. You may choose the colony, and that is honorable. Or you may choose the canyon, and that is also honorable. But whatever choice you make, it must come from your heart, not your duty alone." Elias considered her words carefully. For years, he had let duty and logic dictate his life. He had refused connection because it complicated his work. But now he realized that connection, collaboration, and human partnership were not obstacles, they were strengths. "I cannot leave," he said finally, his voice steady, though tinged with emotion. "Not yet. Not while this canyon and this settlement and you—" He stopped, feeling the weight of his words. Aeon stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "Then you are making your choice," she said softly. "Not for me, but for yourself. You are choosing what is meaningful, and that is the hardest choice a person can make." Elias nodded. For the first time in many years, he felt certainty in a decision that had nothing to do with orders, duty, or obligation. He was choosing human ingenuity, collaboration, and connection over recognition and comfort. He was choosing the canyon, and the woman who had challenged him to reconsider his solitude. They spent the rest of the evening reinforcing the shelter and checking the water systems one last time. The work was steady and quiet, filled with shared understanding and mutual respect. They spoke little, but every glance, every nod, and every gesture communicated trust, appreciation, and a growing bond. As night fell, the canyon quiet and still beneath a sky full of stars, Elias and Aeon sat together on a rock, looking over the settlement. The turbines spun gently in the wind, and the water flowed smoothly through the channels they had built. The canyon was alive with the results of human effort, ingenuity, and cooperation. "You made the right choice," Aeon said softly. "Not because of me, but because you recognized what truly matters." Elias turned to her, the soft starlight illuminating his face. "Perhaps I am learning that some walls are meant to be opened," he said quietly, "and some choices are meant to be shared." Aeon smiled, a quiet, knowing expression. "Then perhaps the canyon has taught you more than you expected." Elias nodded. For the first time he felt the quiet thrill of hope, not for adventure, not for recognition, but for a partnership built on respect, skill, and understanding. He had chosen a path that embraced connection and collaboration, and for the first time in years, he felt the promise of a future filled with possibility. And in the quiet desert under the alien stars of Arisia, Elias realized that some challenges were worth facing together, and some rewards were meant to be shared. The first light of dawn spilled across the canyon, turning the red cliffs to gold and amber. Captain Elias Thorne stood near the edge of the settlement, surveying the small community he and Aeon had nurtured. The wind whistled softly through the turbines, carrying with it the scent of desert plants and the faint hint of water from the channels below. It had been weeks since Elias had made his choice to stay. In that time, he and Aeon had worked tirelessly to improve the settlement. Their combined efforts had transformed it from a small, isolated cluster of shelters into a thriving hub of innovation. The water system now collected and stored enough to sustain not only Aeon's settlement, but also neighboring areas. Turbines and solar collectors provided reliable energy, while small greenhouses flourished with food grown from the canyon's fertile soil. Elias felt a quiet pride as he watched the settlement hum with life. But more than pride, he felt connection with the land, the settlement, and most importantly with Aeon. Their partnership had deepened into trust, mutual respect, and a shared vision of what human ingenuity could achieve. Aeon approached, carrying a small tablet displaying maps and energy readings. "Morning," she said, her voice calm and confident. "The turbines are at peak efficiency. The water channels are stable and the greenhouses show excellent growth rates." Elias smiled. "Good work. It seems our combined effort is paying off." She returned the smile, a flicker of warmth in her dark eyes. "It is paying off because we are working together. Alone, this would not have been possible." He nodded, thinking back to the first day he had arrived in the canyon. He had been alone, cautious, and distant. He had refused companionship, believing it was easier to focus on his work and remain untethered. But now he understood that true progress, whether in technology, survival, or life itself, was rarely achieved alone. "Do you remember the question you asked me?" Elias asked softly. Aeon's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Do you want a wife or just a place to stay?" "Yes," he said, chuckling quietly. "I understand it differently now. I do not want merely a place to stay, and perhaps I do want a partner, someone to share life and work with." She smiled softly. "Then perhaps we both have learned something about what we truly need." The day passed with focused work. Elias and Aeon explored a nearby ravine that Aeon had suspected contained hidden water sources. The path was narrow and winding, but together they navigated it carefully. True to her instincts, Aeon led Elias to a small underground spring, partially covered by rock formations. "This could double our water supply," she said excitedly. "We can expand the channels from here and store water for the entire canyon." Elias studied the flow, analyzing the angles and speed of the water. "If we construct additional reservoirs here and here," he said, pointing to strategic spots, "we can minimize loss and maximize storage." Aeon nodded, impressed. "You see what I do not always see. Together we are stronger." They spent hours building small dams, directing water into new channels and reinforcing the existing infrastructure. The canyon responded to their efforts. Water flowed steadily, turbines spun more efficiently, and the settlement below thrived under the improvements. As evening approached, the pair stood on a high rock overlooking the valley. Below, the settlement glimmered in the golden light, turbines turning, water flowing, greenhouses thriving. The sound of laughter echoed from a small group of settlers who had recently joined Aeon's community, drawn by the promise of a well-managed canyon and the opportunity to learn from the two engineers. Elias felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. This was more than accomplishment. This was community, collaboration, the tangible result of human ingenuity, perseverance, and trust. "You have done more than improve the canyon," Aeon said softly, breaking the quiet. "You have helped people believe in what humans can achieve together." Elias turned to her. "And you have reminded me that life is more than work, data, and efficiency. It is also connection, respect, and shared purpose." Aeon reached for his hand, a simple gesture, but one filled with trust and understanding. "Then perhaps we have both grown," she said. Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, we have grown." Over the next several days, they continued to expand the settlement. New families arrived, bringing with them fresh energy, ideas, and skills. Children ran along the water channels, learning how the turbines worked. Young engineers helped reinforce the structures, guided by the wisdom and experience of Elias and Aeon. Elias taught them the principles of energy optimization, water management, and sustainable living. Aeon shared her knowledge of the canyon's natural patterns, showing them how to read the wind, find water, and adapt to the harsh desert environment. Together, they built not just structures but a community, grounded in trust, learning, and shared responsibility. One afternoon, while inspecting the greenhouses, Elias paused and looked at Aeon. "Do you remember the first day I arrived?" he asked. She smiled, wiping dirt from her hands. "I do. You were cautious, distant, but curious. I knew then that you were different from the others." He chuckled. "I was afraid of connection. I thought solitude was strength. But I realize now that strength comes from partnership, from trust, and from working together toward a shared goal." Aeon nodded. "And sometimes it comes from seeing the potential in someone else and believing in them." Elias looked around at the thriving settlement, the flowing water, the spinning turbines, the greenhouses full of life, and the people working together. All of this is human ingenuity at its best," he said softly. "And it is more than machines and structures. It is people working together, helping each other, learning from each other." Aeon's eyes softened. "Exactly, and this is only the beginning. The canyon still holds secrets, and there is much we can do to improve life here and perhaps inspire other settlements." As twilight fell, the settlement glowed with lights powered by turbines and solar collectors. Families gathered around small fires, sharing stories, laughter, and meals. Elias and Aeon stood on the edge of the canyon, watching the scene unfold below. "You have changed this place, Elias," Aeon said quietly. "But more importantly, you have changed how people see what is possible. You have shown them that humans can thrive even in the harshest environments when we work together." He smiled, feeling a sense of completeness he had never known before. "And you have shown me that connection, respect, and trust are as important as any machine or system." Aeon leaned closer. "Then perhaps our question from the first day has its answer," she said softly, echoing her playful challenge. "You do not want just a place to stay. You want a partnership, a shared journey, a place to grow together." Elias took a deep breath, looking at her with calm certainty. "Yes, that is what I want. Not just a place to stay, but a partner in life, work, and discovery." She smiled, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "Then let us continue to build together, Captain, not just the settlement, but our future." He nodded, feeling the rare thrill of hope and possibility. Together, they would face challenges, solve problems, and nurture life in the canyon. And in doing so, they would prove that humanity's greatest strength was not just ingenuity or technology. It was the ability to work together, trust each other, and create something enduring from even the harshest conditions. The wind blew gently through the canyon, carrying with it the hum of turbines, the flow of water, and the laughter of settlers. Stars shimmered overhead, silent witnesses to the remarkable transformation below. Elias and Aeon stood side by side, looking at the thriving settlement, knowing that their partnership had made all of this possible. In that moment, the canyon was no longer a harsh, isolated place. It was a symbol of human potential, collaboration, and connection. And for Elias, it was a home filled with purpose, hope, and the quiet promise of a shared journey, a place where he no longer had to refuse companionship, because he had finally found the right partner. Together, they had built more than a settlement. They had built a community, a future, and a bond that would endure through every challenge the desert, the canyon, or the universe could throw at them. And as the night deepened, the canyon alive with life and light, Elias knew that the question asked long ago, "Do you want a wife, or just a place to stay?" had finally been answered.